Welcome, Leominsterites, to the May episode of Representing Leominster. And today is a special episode. It's just going to be me, and you may or may not be aware, but over the last 6 months, I have had some really exciting opportunities to go travel abroad with American delegations to visit Morocco, Tunisia, and Taiwan. And I wanted to take a moment to share some pictures with you and talk a little bit about my experiences in this episode, so I hope you enjoy. We have a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation. I've got a clicker, so some more technology than we usually have, and I'm going to walk you through our trip. So we started in December when I was picked for the first excursion to Tunisia and Morocco, to be able to go with a group of 7 American young political leaders to both the capitals and learn about their governments and learn about how we can be better partners. And so, perfect. We're learning the technology. So from December 6th to December 18th, I was in first Tunisia and then over to Morocco. And I was being hosted by the American Council of Young Political Leaders in partnership with the State Department. And the American Council of Young Political Leaders, ACYPL, actually started back in the 60s. And this is the first American delegation in front of the Berlin Wall in 1968. And since its founding in 1966, ACYPL has given elected officials and policy experts a global perspective through international exchange programs. They believe in bringing people together across oceans, borders, and the political spectrum to foster mutual understanding, respect, and friendship among the next generation of leaders worldwide. So I was really thankful to be a part of this trip. ACYPL has over 8,500 alumni worldwide. They include 38 current members of Congress, and they have partnerships in 128 countries and territories over the last 53 years. So it was a really great opportunity to join them. And this is a picture of our delegation when we were still in DC getting prepped at the State Department. Before we left the US, we had meetings with the State Department, with the Moroccan embassy, and we met the ambassador of Tunisia. We also met the US ambassador to Tunisia while we were in Tunisia. And our group was 7 young political leaders, some elected officials, some folks who work in government. From Massachusetts, myself, Maryland, 2 were from Washington, D.C., Texas, Kentucky, and Louisiana. So we were really well represented across the region. They also try really hard to have a mixed group based on gender, ethnicity, and political parties. So there were 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats in the group. And our first trip was to Tunisia, and admittedly, I had very little expectation about what Tunisia was going to be like. If you're not familiar, Tunisia is in northern Africa, covering over 63,000 square miles. Its northernmost point, Cape Angela, is the northernmost point in all of Africa. It's bordered by Algeria and Libya and the Mediterranean Sea. And they have just over 11 million people in Tunisia, so a little bit bigger than Massachusetts. And I was based in their capital of Tunis. And the most exciting part about being in Tunisia and being hosted by their local partner type, Tunisian American young professionals, was that in 2011, if you're not familiar, Tunisia was one of the most successful revolutions during the Arab Spring. They had their Jasmine Revolution. So being there in 2018, we were about 7 years into their new democracy. And it was a really great experience to meet with young leaders who were living abroad and saw this revolution happen, saw democracy start in their country and say, I want to come back. I want to be a part of this. And while we were there, they were getting ready for their first round of re-elections. So it was a really exciting part of time to be in their government, learning from them. And you'll see, we started off with some cultural excursions because we got in on the weekend. So we got to learn the history of Tunisia. But then we had really great meetings with government officials from local level all the way to their executive branch. And let's see if I can pull up. So we checked out Kairouan, which is actually really well known for Al Jem, the amphitheater. It's a leftover of the Roman Empire, and it's actually one of the most preserved amphitheaters left, and is kind of the largest area of the Roman Empire in northern Africa. It could hold 35,000 spectators. Only the Colosseum in Rome and one other Colosseum was larger. And so we got to, unlike the Colosseum in Rome, we got to go walk directly in, touch it. Up until the 17th century, this was built in the 3rd century. Up until the 17th century, it was almost completely whole, and it was only at that point they started using the stone for other projects across Kairouan. And it was not a trip. Everyone who knows me knows I love food, so we got to stop at a family bakery that's famous for making makrut, which is this famous pastry. It has dates in it, and it's fried, and it has like a sugar syrup all over it. So it was a really great experience to see their family and how they were built, how they've been cooking this for decades. And then the one thing most folks that I've met have known about Tunisia is that it's actually the home of Carthage. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Carthage started in the 7th to 3rd centuries BC from the Phoenician state, and is one of the oldest civilizations that we still have the ability to actually see their communities, their homes, and this is some of the ruins of Carthage that we got to get up close and see while we were there. And Tunisia is home to some of the longest aqueducts in all of Africa and some of the longest aqueducts in the Roman Empire. And they're still there. They're still unbelievably preserved and available for all of us to be able to go see and enjoy. And then we got a chance to do a number of great meetings with local leaders, state leaders, and I got to host the delegation to meet with the Secretary of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And you can see I'm showing him some of the history of Massachusetts and Leominster, and it was great. He was really familiar with Massachusetts, but we got to talk a little bit about how Massachusetts and Tunisia have a lot in common in terms of their size, in terms of their economy, and how they're trying to lift up new families and make sure that we have enough economic opportunities for each other. Something that is unique to Tunisia, 1/3 of their college graduates are unemployed, and it's becoming a huge burden on their economy. And it was a recurring theme of one of their motivations for adopting a democracy, but also a struggle 8 years into their democracy to figure out, how do we make this work? Why isn't our economy getting stronger? And they're dealing with so many of the issues we're dealing with in Massachusetts, in the United States, all over the world, of how do we help the next generation do as well or better than our parents. It's, you know, the American dream, that our kids are always going to do better than we have. And they're facing firsthand of how do they work their way through it. And it was really great to be there from the United States, because they were looking to us like, you figured out democracy. It works for you. What are we doing? How can we learn from you? And it was really important for us to remind them that when we were in year 8 of our democracy, you know, we were still figuring it out. It takes some time. There's got to be this belief that you're in a part of something better, and having that democratic voice, having everyone's voice represented is really important. And that's something that those new local leaders can be telling their constituents and making sure that they're participating and they understand the difference in adopting a new democracy. And so we also got to meet with a series of members of parliament, and they focused on other young leaders. So it was great to see people at the beginning of their careers really trying to grapple with issues that their peers are dealing with, and how do they connect with voters in a time where that wasn't the way that government worked for so long, and how are they accountable, and how do they make it accessible what they're working on. And something that, you know, I do this Access TV show, and we have office hours, and we try so hard because we know our constituents have so much on their plates and often don't have an easy time connecting with us. How do we make it easier to be able to connect with you? And that's exactly what these leaders in Tunisia were trying to figure out. And I have a few, and then the next slide is actually, I got a chance to join one of the elected officials from Kentucky on Radio Express FM, which we didn't really know what we were getting into, other than we had to get up earlier than everyone else to go on this radio show. But the host, Wassim Ben Larbi, was actually unbelievably interesting and fascinating when the Arab Spring was happening, when the Jasmine Revolution was happening, his radio station and his show was the only one that stayed on the air while the revolution was happening and while their dictator was fleeing. And he put himself in a really tough situation because he believed and he trusted that this person was saying, okay, you have free press, you want to be free, you can do that. But he didn't know if he was going to have to go into hiding, because if the revolution was not successful, would he be in trouble for holding this open free press during the revolution? And he shared amazing stories of Tunisians calling from all over the world watching the revolution happen in 2011, calling in and expressing their support, expressing their gratitude for everyone in Tunisia, and seeing those folks start to reconnect and come back home. And it was a really great opportunity to also share our experiences in the few days that we got to spend learning about their country, learning about their government. And one last piece of my favorite thing whenever I get to go somewhere new is checking out their food. And since I don't eat meat, it's a little harder to find things. But this Lablabi Tunisian chickpea soup apparently is very common street food, super easy, super cheap, and happens to be vegetarian. So I was really excited that we got to take a break and try some food directly from a street vendor and learn more about their cuisine and their spices. And being in the Mediterranean in Northern Africa, all of the food was delicious, and I nothing disappointed. And more than anything, they wanted to show us how great their food was. And before we left, I got a chance to go see the World War II American Cemetery of Carthage that was dedicated in 1960. It's a 27-acre North Africa American cemetery and memorial in Tunisia that laid to rest 2,841 of our military. And their headstones are in 9 rectangular plots with wide paths and decorative pools and intersections. And along the southeast edge of the burial area, bordering a tree-lined terrace, there's the Wall of the Missing, and on this wall, 3,724 names are engraved. Most who are honored here lost their lives in World War II in military activities ranging from North Africa to the Persian Gulf. It was a really amazing time for us to reflect, and it was the first time that I got to see an American cemetery on foreign soil and to be able to go and pay respect to folks who have given so much to us. Was really, really special, and I was really happy that they worked that into the schedule. And so after that, we headed over to Morocco, a 7.5-hour plane ride to Rabat, and Rabat is the head of their government. You might know of Morocco more for Casablanca or Marrakesh, but Rabat is where their government is centered. And we met with a number of Moroccan parliament officials and government officials. We got to tour a number of their meeting spaces, their chambers that were all really beautiful. This is one of the newer, smaller spaces. This is their old chamber. And as you'll see, this is their new chamber that had just opened with a really special dome. And it was really amazing to be able to be hosted and get to see that. And then we didn't stay in Rabat the entire time we were there. We headed down to Casablanca and saw the Hassan II Mosque. And it's the largest mosque in Africa. It's the 5th largest mosque in the world, and it has the world's tallest minaret at 210 meters, 689 feet. It was completed in 1993, and the minaret is 60 stories high. And it can hold, the building itself can hold 25,000 people inside the mosque hall and 80,000 on the mosque outside ground. And the mosque actually opens up from the inside. It has an electric roof to allow more airflow when they're actually completely full. It was really beautiful and really, really amazing for them to share this space with us. And just like we were in Tunisia, we got to tour their historical sites and see the ruins and learn more about their history and the number of civilizations that kind of existed throughout the history of Morocco. And what was special is we got to meet with NGO leaders, so they're nonprofit leaders. And this woman runs an economic development site that teaches women from southern Morocco crafting and how to sell those crafts and how to become independent. And it was really great to meet with their leaders, talk about their role in government and how are they pushing government to be more accountable. How are young leaders who maybe don't see themselves running for political office using their roles in other social service organizations to push the community forward, just like we see here in the US. And the trip was not complete without me attempting a selfie to get a picture of, this is the Medina. So the Medina is the old town, and getting a chance to be able to see and go through the streets, get to know the community, and visit all of the vendors for food and goods. And it was a really, really great trip. And many of you know I'm a cat owner. So if you want to meet with me and chat about cats, I have a whole collage of cats of Northern Africa. And this was a really great, they were very, very happy, as you can see from the cat on the right, who is sunning itself in Morocco. And one last thing that I want to talk about on my trip to Morocco and Tunisia was the program called itself the MENA trip, the Middle East North Africa trip. And I asked repeatedly when we were meeting folks from the region, what do you think about, like, do you consider yourselves Middle Eastern? Do you consider yourselves North African? Do you consider yourselves Mediterranean? Like, what would you call yourselves? And I'm gonna hop back to one of the maps, if I can. Let's see. When I hop back to one of the maps, the thing that they kept bringing up was, okay, look at Tunis on the map. We're west of Rome. Do you think of Italians as Middle Eastern? Like, we may both be Muslim countries, but we don't consider ourselves that. We consider ourselves North African. We consider ourselves Mediterranean. It's quicker often for us to get to Spain or Italy or Greece. And that was a really interesting thing for us to think about, what language we're using and how are we describing regions, and are we using terms that are just too broad based on really not learning enough about them. And then just over a month ago, I got a call. The speaker pro temp nominated me for a trip to Taipei with another young American delegation group hosted by the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office. So for about a week, I got a chance to visit Taipei and Taiwan. And we had a larger delegation from all over the country. We had DC represented, Missouri, Georgia, Ohio, Florida, 2 from California, Los Angeles and the Silicon Valley, Massachusetts, Texas, and Montana. And it was a really great opportunity. My expectations heading to Taiwan were technology. And my first trip was to play with robots and to learn about their education systems and what after-school programs they have, what other kinds of robotic technology they have. And that was most of what I expected we were going to be learning about, is just how much new technology is coming from Taiwan. And we got to try out some of the new virtual reality gaming, which just blows my mind in how fast technology is moving and how much more accessible it's going to be, and how we aren't even able to anticipate how technology is changing around our lives for good and for bad, and how we need to be thinking as communities about how do we want to integrate this technology, and how do we want to have it help our lives, and how do we want to make sure that those negative effects are addressed. And that came up in the discussions in terms of face recognition. Are companies, companies are hoping that we're going to be able to go in to their store, they're going to be able to use computer screens to identify our age, our gender, maybe our preferences if we're at a coffee shop, but could that go further and kind of keep track of us, how often we're going, and how much are we comfortable about that? And they're all of these companies are talking about that, and I'm assuming those conversations are also happening here in the US. And at the same time, beyond just the technology in Taiwan, we were able to check out a number of cultural experiences. We toured the Longshan Temple and learned more about the role of religion in the life of the Taiwanese and some of those cultural changes. And we were at the end of a holiday, so we got to see a quite busier temple. And then we toured the Hinshu Science Park. So the federal government owns these science parks all across Taiwan where they build the space, lease the space, provide the technology, and allow startups to use that technology to incubate new businesses, new technology, all completely funded by the government. It was something that was really special to us because I don't think we've seen that kind of partnership by the government and the startup community. We've seen grants in the US and particularly in states, but not this idea that you create this space to foster this innovation. And clearly in Taiwan, it's been really successful. And it's not a trip without testing out some food, and dim sum is something that's really, really popular. And we got to go to Din Tai Fung, which is a really famous place, and they actually have them in the US. But in checking out the grocery stores, I was really interested to find that Boston garlic shrimp is apparently a very popular Doritos brand. So who knew Boston was finding its way into Taiwanese culinary scene? Next up, we toured Taipei 101, which is one of the tallest buildings in the country. It has one of the fastest elevators, and we actually had dinner with a local artist, Master Kang Musheng, who, using these cables, because these cables for these elevators can only be used for so long before they have to be replaced, he builds these sculptures, and you can see it on the right, these sculptures based on his life experience to tell a story, and actually has worked with the local prisons to clean the cables and to work with them and to give this idea of rebirth. This whole collection was around rebirth, and it was really great to also meet someone from the artist community who are trying to reuse materials within the community and give new opportunities for everyone in their community. And my favorite part of our trip to Taiwan was meeting with the metro company. Public transit is something that I care deeply about out here in North Central Mass, especially when our commuter rail is not always reliable. We have are constantly facing cuts to our public regional transportation because of funding, and getting to learn about their transit system. They move 2 million people a day on their trains, and it costs basically $5 in their currency, 30 cents in ours per trip. And it is actually an enterprise that doesn't lose any money, and they've figured out a way to do public-private partnerships in a really great way, and really, I think, innovative and smart. So every single metro stop has a mini mall where there are restaurants that you can get food to go, that you can pick up snacks, gifts, any of that. So you know that that's there every time you get off the metro. And they rent out that space to help subsidize the cost of the train. We also got a chance to take their high-speed rail, and in 45 minutes, for about $20 US, we were able to travel 4 hours by car, what would have been 4 hours by car. And we were going through mountains to get to the center of Taiwan. And I asked, so you're just cutting through mountains, how are you doing this? Was this an obstacle? Was this a barrier? And they said, well, we needed to connect the north to the south, so we needed to go through the mountains. The mountains were in the way, and it was pretty much that simple. And they were so interested in making sure that all of their country had access to each other and could move freely. And to further balance their books and make sure that the metro station and the high-speed rail is profitable, they also manage one of their stadiums that has a lot of musical acts and sports. And they also manage an amusement park. So the revenue from those two enterprises helps balance the budget for all of the public transit. And that was something that I hadn't seen and I thought was really novel. And we got a chance before we left to try our hand at making some tea, for learning how tea is made, obviously across the entire southeastern region. Tea is an amazing, amazing export, and it is not as easy as it looks. It was really hard to make tea. I did not win the master tea maker, but I was able to bring my tea home. And we got to learn about the different kinds of tea. What is the process for rolling the tea and drying the tea and making it ready? And before we left Taiwan, we got a chance to tour the flower and jade markets that open up on Sundays before we left. And these were, I just assumed that they were a market like I had seen a market, but these are hundreds upon hundreds of vendors in both of these buildings that they use this space actually right under the public transit to have local vendors come and sell their goods, their gifts. There were people just doing regular shopping, food in the flower market. I'm assuming any kind of gifts that you need to get for your loved ones. And it was really amazing to just see a thriving economy. And having traveled in India, I was expecting, Taiwan is one of the most densely populated countries in the world. I was expecting to feel really densely populated, and it didn't feel at all like India, which I loved my time in Delhi. But to see the innovation, to see the excitement, to see the confidence in everyone. We met with university students and got to discuss our work with them and answer their questions and ask them questions. And it was another really amazing experience to learn from their government, and they come and do exchanges in the US. And so it's something that I didn't anticipate I was going to get to take a part in when I became state representative, but these delegation trips to get to know and share lessons from each other's government, I took so much back from all three of these countries and ideas that I continue to work into in legislation and how to be a better representative. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to let me share a little bit about my experience. And if you have any questions about that, please pop into my office hours. Every Monday night, I'm at the Leominster Library from 5:30 to 7 p.m. And Friday mornings, I'm at the Leominster High School from 7 to 8 a.m. until the end of June. And then in the summer, it'll be July and August by appointment in our office. And as always, you can reach us via all the contact information that's going to air at the end of the show. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next month.